I make you host and you record it?
You already made me host.
Okay. Have I made you the host? I'm gonna make you the
I'm happy to. Welcome everybody. I see a lot of my business colleagues on today's session. So hello. And for those of you who I haven't had an opportunity to meet, my name is Kristen Krebs, and I'm a member of the Committee to Advance Teaching and Learning in the Schmidthorst College of Business, which is the host of this session today. I'm really happy to introduce you to Steve Koppitsch, who's an associate professor, as you can see, in the marketing department. Among Steve's many teaching accomplishments, he's recently been selected as a high impact teaching winner business. And I asked him to present today to share how we can make our online final exams fair and maintain the security and integrity of them. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Steve. Thank you so much. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Kristen. All right, so online finals. And so obviously this is kind of what our students are going to be looking at coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we're all online after Thanksgiving. So whether you're online now or not, or so if you're hybrid, you're now going to be switching. So we're all facing this situation. And so in talking with Kristen and Steve about topics for a talk like this, I think Steve came up with this idea about final exams. That's something that I think a lot of us obviously have to deal with now, whether we've done it before or not. I mean, we all got thrown into the fire last spring, but now, I think we're more expected to give final exams. We have our assigned final exam periods, and and so we're all going to be doing it. So what do we do to try and keep some integrity in the final exam process? So before I go into that, I wanted to try and do a little discussion first. Kind of get a feel for the virtual room here.
Hear Steve, are you talking?
I was. You can't hear me? Can people hear me?
I can.
Good. All right, just Chris from. All right. Sorry, Chris. All right, so I wanted to get a kind of a feel for the room about what you're thinking. And so to start off, just kind of what are your goals when giving an exam? Like, what are your thoughts about, like, what are you trying to do when you give an exam?
I'm trying to assess their understanding of the material.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I'm trying to make sure they're not cheating very much.
Not cheating very much. All right. Any other thoughts?
I'm trying to differentiate who knows a lot and who knows a little.
Okay, kind of. You want to get some, some A's, some B's, some C's, and so on. All right, good.
Well, my learning, objectives, the learning, outcomes were just really, shown in the final exam.
Okay, all right. So it's just in the chat, assessing what they truly know. So I guess, we're all trying to assess what people know. And so the question then becomes, and Merle said not cheating very much. And so that's why this idea of integrity, as mentioned in the chat box, becomes important. So, we're trying to get a baseline, kind of get this knowledge of students and what they know, as honestly as possible. So we're all trying to do that. And so, so I have another question. So why are you, so you're all here, you're all talking, worried about integrity. So why are you concerned about online finals?
I gave an online exam a couple weeks ago. There was an extra credit question, and 3 of the students came up with the same answer, which was wrong, but it was a very obscure answer. So I'm quite sure that they consulted with each other.
Okay, so you have found cheating in your experience. And actually, I had the exact same thing happen about 3 years ago. Extra credit and the same wrong answer. The extra credit was about what my kids, I showed a picture of my kids dressed up for Halloween, and the extra credit question was to see who was paying attention that day. What were my kids dressed up as? And I found teams, like half the class had worked in teams and came up with the same answers. That was a fun week. All right, so you found cheating. What else?
Or you suspect cheating, but you haven't found it.
Okay, good.
So along that line, so I gave an online exam a couple weeks ago, and I made them log it. So essentially they download a Word file, they fill it out, they send it back up, but I made them join the class Zoom so I could watch them, which didn't help. But so I had one person whose English is not very good and who had never used the software that we were using in the course for any assignment or anything, and had done very poorly, and then handed in something in perfect English that used the software she had never used before. And I'm guessing it wasn't her,
Okay.
but I have no proof.
So suspecting cheating, found cheating. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Any other thoughts?
I'm
All right.
concerned because I have two sections of a course, and the exams, even though the course is back to back, I don't know whoever designed this final exam schedule that just rotates, by the way, each semester. When it rotates past a weekend, like you have an exam that's separated like by 3 days. So some students are taking my exam on Tuesday and some are on Friday. And, I know people talk between sections, and that's my big worry. And I'm doing unlike my midterms, which are you build a spreadsheet and you turn it in. Well, that would be a disaster because they would send those files to everybody, and for 3 days, people could be working on them. And so now it's quiz based, with Canvas quiz and lockdown browser. I don't think I'm going to use the video camera because I don't know. I just, since this is not an online course, it's a remote course. I didn't, I can't assume everyone has a webcam, I guess. Maybe I should. I don't know.
I don't know what the policy of the university was. I do, but I told them that at the beginning of the semester though. So
yeah, I haven't told them that, and I guess could I tell them now and say, hey, you need to have a webcam? And what my colleague does, Ebo, he does online courses. He has them pick up their laptop and show their whole desk. He doesn't allow them to have anything. And I all semester have said, open book, whatever. It slows you down. So I say I don't really encourage you to have open books, but so I don't know if the camera will help. Maybe you'll talk about that in this session.
All
right, well,
a moment. I used the camera and I thought that was a good deterrent, but I had 3 people that just openly cheated in front of the camera this semester. And so I'm like, I don't know what to do about that. I know what I did, but just in terms of what else can I do except monitor it and
So students, someone from my Friday exam could come sit in the Tuesday one and just watch what that other student does on their exam, right? Or if on camera, they could just watch from off camera. They could see what the questions are. So I don't know. The questions I'm using are largely computational with random numbers, and I'm giving them as homework for these next 3 weeks some of the exam problems anyway that they can practice on. But the numbers change every time you do it, so I'm not real concerned. But I thought maybe coming here you could tell me cameras help or not. I don't know.
Yeah, well, okay. I'm gonna go through some methods eventually.
So
Steve,
Steve and I have
one more thing I'd like to share, and Karen can attest to this. I got involved in an academic honesty issue last semester where a student had paid someone in a different country to take their online exams for them. And what was most shocking to me was that it costs $150 to take a management test, but only $100 for an econ test. So
they can't promise the quality. It's too hard.
Indeed, it was $250 for my Excel-based exam, and it still was a D grade with the other outside party taking it. So
yeah, so that wasn't very effective, but it did. ITS caught it and brought it to our attention. So it was very alarming. And you figure there's probably some more informal domestic stuff going on along those lines if there's this formal market-based thing set up for it also.
Well, Pete, since you mentioned it right now, I was going to share this later on. This is something that we have. There's a site called chegg.com. We just talk about informal. One of my exams, I'll talk about it. I'm going to talk about this exam, but it was the open book exam, and I found on Chegg, someone said, please answer ASAP, will thumbs up. And they copied and pasted my question on Chegg. I don't know if this answer came in time for them to get the answer, but this is something I found here. This is anonymous, so I don't know who did it. And I looked at the answer that was provided, and no one copied and pasted it, so I have no way of knowing for sure who did this. But there are other ways.
That's what I was gonna. I had the same thing happen. It took them less than. It was a take-home exam. They had 24 hours to do it. Less than 24 hours. It was out there on Chegg. I mean, they just copied and pasted it, and their thing said, "Please help. We'll give good rating if you help with the test." Now, I was amazed with the speed with which it got out there. So.
Yeah, well, I found two of my questions on there. One of them was answered and one wasn't. So I don't know how successful it is for everyone, but yeah, they use it. Jeff, what are you gonna?
Yeah, so, Steve and I have talked about this, and I have found my questions on Chegg. So I actually pay, I think it's $15.99 a month for my Chegg subscription, because they'll let you see the questions, but they won't let you see the answers unless you subscribe. And it's just a way for me to find those ones that are out there. And usually they're using terms that are technically correct, but it's not the terms that I use to call things. And that's when I kind of know that it's probably out there, and then I can find it and give them a 0 on that question.
All right, good. So these things are out there, and people do take advantage of them. And so, I mean, I also see in the chat box, I feel like I have a responsibility as the instructor to put practices in place so cheating is not as tempting or accessible. Some will cheat no matter what, and others may cheat a little if the barriers are low. So that's a concern. So we have these concerns about cheating, and for me that comes to me the big issue is and it comes back to the last question that I had up here about what are your goals. You're trying to get an understanding of what they know about the material. You're trying to, do they learn the outcomes? And so, so kind of this overarching goal that we have is to kind of make an even playing field for students. We want to make sure that they're all starting from the same spot, and someone doesn't have an unfair advantage over the rest. And I'm trying to come up with different approaches that I've used. So I don't claim to be an expert in this. I thought this would be a good discussion topic, and we can see what people have used and if it's working. I'm going to talk about some things that I've used in the past. I've done different methods online, looking up what other people have said online. There was just a couple of weeks ago, there was a discussion in the BGSU faculty listserv about keeping students honest. There's some ideas there. So I try to cobble everything together to kind of get some ideas, and then you can take all these and pick what you would like out of it all. So the first approach that I was thinking was something that's mentioned, and that's trying to catch cheaters. And I say, what, I want to make sure that we have as little cheating as possible, and I want to catch them all. And in my opinion, the most effective tool, if you want to do that, is lockdown browser. And you can have, and this is a screenshot of what you see. Do lockdown browser. I do the webcam, and I do this for an intro class. I don't do it for I do it for an introductory class. It's a lot of multiple choice, and and if you've never used it before, when you're what it does is the lockdown browser part. It's a special browser that they have to install on their computer, and when it's open and are taking the quiz, they're not allowed to access anything else on the computer. The downside, of course, of this is they still have their phones, they still have a tablet, they still have some other whatever they want. And so the next step is, if you want for added security, is the idea of the Respondus monitor, which is using the webcam. And this actually takes a video. of each student as they're taking the exam. And then when you're done, you see results and you see, okay, I mean, I've obviously taken off the student names here, but you see each student's listed on the side and you see kind of a review priority, and it's measuring as they took the exam, were they, it's basically assuming that if I'm taking an exam, I'm going to be, and I have no notes and I'm not cheating, I'm in this position. I got my hands on the keyboard or on the mouse, and I'm going to be looking at the screen the whole time. So if I'm going down like this, if I've got a second, if I've got my phone and I'm trying to look up information, I'm going to be looking away from the screen, and it's going to catch that, and it's going to flag it as a higher priority. And that's actually exactly what Kristen was talking about a few minutes ago, where she saw students, and she told me about her situation where there was a student who was taking the exam and had a second computer over here, would type questions and type here, and it got flagged, and she looked at it. And so I don't, when I use this, I mean, I honestly just look at this. I look at the priority. If something's flagged as high, I'll look into it, and you click on it and you get some more information. And it looks kind of like this. I've obviously, again, hidden. I mean, this was not a cheater, never, regardless, but this is kind of what you see. I just wanted to blur out faces, so I put Cookie Monster. But you see that you have a video of the entire thing, and then little thumbnails showing up when the, every so often, every 50 seconds, looks like in this case, give you a little thumbnail. And if there's anything flagged, if there's anything where they're looking away, it'll actually highlight it on the timeline down here and say, okay, it'll be red, and you can go look at it, and you can watch it, and you can say, was this cheating or not? Sometimes I see, if they're taking the exam on their lap, the kind of their face drifts like this and it gets flagged, but I don't think they're cheating. Sometimes, they're obviously looking down and doing things. So it gives you this ability. So obviously it helps, but it might not be best for all exams. If you want to let students have notes, if you want to let students do open book exams, then this is less effective. Because if you're allowing students to use a book, well, they're going to be looking at their book, and they're going to be looking away, and so everybody's going to get flagged. And so when I use it, by the way, I actually do let students use a sheet of notes. So for me, this is a deterrent. I'm not. I get a lot of emails from students saying, "Oh my gosh, I had my internet cut out during the exam." And so students are worried that I'm going to fail them for the exam because they weren't looking at the screen the whole time, or their internet cut out. So that some students panic, some students will still cheat anyway, as Kristen found out. And they're assuming that we're not actually going to check this.
Am I the only one that's not able to hear Steve?
Nope, we lost your audio, Steve.
I can't hear either.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I think I elbowed the mute button on my microphone. Sorry.
Oh, I hate it.
I don't know what I was talking about when I cut out, but I was saying basically that this kind of is the closest you can get if you want to try and make it like an in-person exam where you can see everybody and look at what they're doing. This is the closest thing you can do. And just like in an in-person exam, students are still going to try and write answers on their hands and things like that. I mean, people are still going to maybe try and cheat. So people are still going to try and cheat here potentially. I'm sure I haven't looked, but I'm sure there's lots of resources out there that tell students how to cheat on these things. So that's one approach. Another approach is to try and make it difficult to cheat. What makes it less likely for people to, not less likely, but if students are cheating, what can you do to try and make it less successful or harder to cheat? And a lot of that to me has to do with a couple of things. The first one is question design. What questions do you have? If you have short answer rather than multiple choice. So multiple choice, you can try and, people can work close to each other. So if you, and my thought in this is that you're not necessarily going to be using lockdown browser. So if you're not using lockdown browser, what do you do? And so you can use different types of questions. So use short answer rather than multiple choice. So where you can actually read questions and see answers, and if there's similarities. you can have, if you want to use multiple choice or even for short answer, you can have large test banks. I think in the in that discussion board, I think it was Karen Ebach actually said that she has 40 questions and has a test bank of 150. So the chances of students having, I mean, the chance of students have the exact same exam or almost nothing. I mean, I'm not a statistician, but you know, but I mean, there might be some overlap, but it won't be that great in theory. And what Jeff was talking about before with looking up on Chegg, another thing is changing the wording of your question each semester. You know, so if you have a short answer question or a multiple choice question, you know, changing the answer. So if you're, and this especially goes true if you're using test banks. If you're using a test bank from a publisher test bank, you know, those answers are all online. And so you need to change the answers from that, change the questions from that. Again, talking with Jeff in years past, he had, you know, you can Google your questions and find them on there. And you know, but if you change something small about it, so if you know, in business, if you have a question and you're talking about Coca-Cola does this, next semester, change it to Ford. And all of a sudden Chegg doesn't notice it as much. And having a big company like that, you know, there's lots of questions that come up that are on that, you know, Chegg and Google might be harder to find specific answers if you change your questions. So those are some things you can try and do with your questions. Canvas has some options as well to try and help you with this idea of making cheating more difficult. There are things like time limits, so you can have a timed exam and try and make it so students have to go fast. So if you have an open book exam or, you know, a non-lockdown browser exam, you know, if you have a time limit, students can't spend half their time looking things online or they're going to run out of time. So that could be a deterrent. I think someone, again, in a discussion board post, someone did point out the fact that that could also reward people who are good at Googling. You know, so if you have too short of a time limit. Canvas has the option of one question at a time. So if you're doing multiple choice or short answer, you have one question pop up at a time. Lock it so students can't go forward and backward. And then also randomize, and then, you know, so one question at a time, lock it, and then also randomize the order. So students are getting questions at different points in time. So if they are working next to each other, you know, if the first question that student A gets might be the 30th question that student B gets. And so, you know, so it's harder to share answers in that situation potentially. I mean, obviously it can be done, but it's more inconvenient. And then, Chris, you mentioned computational exams. You know, Canvas does have formula questions where you can put in a formula and it'll generate, you can put in a range, you know, so if you want to do I do like a break-even formula. And so I have, you know, ranges of what it sees it with different numbers. I say, okay, I want to have a fixed cost in this range, variable cost in this range, and then it generates different versions of the same question. So that way, you know, if students are sharing the answer, say, hey, the answer to the break-even question was 10,000. Well, the next student might, their correct answer is going to be 12,000. If they answer 10,000, it's wrong. You can also have, not just do computation, not just ask for the answer, but ask them to ask a separate question afterwards where they have to explain the process. Like, how did you come up to your answer, and force them to show, I mean, you know, not with, when I say show your work, I don't necessarily mean, you know, I want to see the computations you did, but tell me the process and why you got that answer and what it means. And so you can do things along those lines. And then the last approach is to kind of let them all cheat. And that's kind of the approach that I use in one of my other classes. So I have my intro class where I do the lockdown browser, and I have an international marketing class where I say I let them all cheat. And what I mean by that is I tell them ahead of time, you're not using lockdown browser. You're not using, you know, I'm not locking questions. You have the access to the exam for the full exam time, and that means I mean, so my thinking behind it is, if I tell that to, if that's all I tell the students, if I tell them here's your exam, you have it available, no lockdown browser, some students are going to see that as an opportunity to Google every answer, and some students are going to try and do it with just their notes. And so I tell them, like, hey, this is open book. You can go online, try some Googling, and I try and, again, level the playing field in that sense. And you know, who knows? I mean, does it work? Obviously not always. I show you that that Chegg example where someone did, you know, post questions. So that obviously still happens. So people are still going to cheat. So another thing that I use, is not necessarily about, this is something I use no matter what, not just for this approach, is there's an idea about an honesty statement. And again, this came up also in the in that discussion board. And I've been using them for a few years. It may be effective, may not be, but I have the first question of the exam is to read this following statement. You may not give or receive any unauthorized help on this exam. All work must be your own. Violating the codes of conduct will result in an F in the course. And then I have them type their name. So it's an essay question in Canvas, and I have them type their name. For that open book exam version, I added this, while this is an open book exam, you may only use your textbook and online sources, but you may not receive help. I mean, online sources, I mean, I think I need to change that now that I saw how Chegg was used, but anyway, but yeah, that's.
I've heard this too, not from the discussion board, but just from reading about psychology, and I guess this works. I've made it worth like a point. I'll make it true, false. You know, I have or have not cheated. You know, so if they answer false, I guess they're being honest, but they'll lose.
Yeah.
What do you do if they say false?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I had one student once, you know, say, type in there instead of his name, say, I do not agree to this, or something like that.
Yeah. What if they don't type their name? When I was a grad student 20 something years ago, we had a student athlete who cheated on the exam. He, you know, there's two versions, paper exam. He copied the wrong version, and the professor went to investigate, and he hadn't signed the honesty pledge. So I don't know what that professor did, but
I mean, to me, this has nothing to do with whether I can enforce it. I mean, the code of conduct to me applies no matter what, whether they sign this or whether they put their name there or not.
Yeah,
that's
you're
why
just reminding them, and if they sign it, it's kind of it's ingraining in them that it's making them psychologically follow the rules. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a research that shows it helps actually some of those authors that, and so in this case with the discussion board, someone said, hey, here's an article about it, and I looked at that article, and it was the same authors 10 years ago said it helps, and then like 4 or 5 years ago said, we're not sure if it helps. We did more research and we're questioning our results. But all of their statements at the beginning were just kind of, the statements were all something along the lines of, I can't remember if I still have it open. No, I don't have it open anymore. They were just something along the lines of, I'm being honest. And that was it. So I put in there, you know, what the penalty is going to be. And so I try and make it seem like it's important, and that I'm going to, you know, again, I'm trying to make it seem like I'm going to try and catch them. So the, as I see in the chat again, someone did something like this in a module at the beginning of it's a prerequisite for the final exam. So you have it as a separate assignment, it sounds like. So yes, something along those lines. So you had to say, so that was, someone actually had, so, you know, in this case, you have to actually sign it to be able to take the final exam, it sounds like in the chat. That's an interesting idea. The other kind of approaches that I have, and this kind of gets back to one of something that was in the chat box about, you know, we have a responsibility to put practices in place so cheating is not as tempting. And that's the last idea. You know, trying to de-incentivize cheating at some point, somehow. And, you know, that's, you know, is there a benefit? I mean, if students don't see as much of a benefit to cheating, then, you know, hopefully that'll make it less likely. So, I mean, that's part of the reason why I, at the beginning, you know, talk about the penalty. So I'm trying to say that, you know, this is, you know, you're going to fail if you cheat. And so, you know, so that's one thing. Other things I've read about are, you know, part of the reason cheating happens is because the exams that we're making are so important. They're a giant chunk of the grade. If this is 20-25% of your grade, or, you know, however much it ends up being, there's a huge incentive to do well on that exam. And so, you know, so some of the people some of the things I saw recommended were, you know, obviously it's too late to do this now, but if you're creating your whole course over the semester, you know, are there ways that you can, instead of saying, I'm going to have 3 exams that are each worth, 100 points out of however many points you have. Break it down and use smaller quizzes. And so, you can do, have 10 shorter quizzes instead of 3 giant exams, and now they're less likely to need to cheat on each individual exam. So that's another way of doing it. So again, those are some of the thoughts I came across that I've used in the past. I want to get this a discussion in a minute, kind of get more thoughts of what you've done. But in my mind, none of this is going to be foolproof. So does any of this actually stop cheating? I already gave this example. So again, this was my open book exam. I said, you have to use your own work. Someone still went to Chegg. Just last night, I submitted an academic honesty violation to the dean because I had 2 students, again, took off their names, who, as you can see, they were teammates. They started within 2 seconds of each other, and they were in sync throughout the whole exam. And there's more than just these 13 questions. And as you can see, even here, question 8, they both answered. He, around 9:01, this is all from the Canvas log. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's when you go to the speed grader, there's a link to view log, and you can see when they answered each question. And student 1 stopped viewing the Canvas quiz at 9 minutes into the exam. Student 2 went on to questions 10 and then 9, answered them. And then they both went back to question 8. So the student 1 went online somewhere looking for the answer to question 8, found it. They both answered question 8. And then he, within 6 seconds, went to question 9, read it, submitted it, went to question 10, read it, submitted it in 15 seconds. And you can see he was spending at least a minute plus on each question. So the student 1 was able to get the answers from student 2, and so to go through those 2 questions really quickly. So they were somehow working with each other, whether it was on Zoom or sitting side by side. Again, I didn't have lockdown browser, so I don't know exactly what they did, but this happened. And so students are still going to do it. And of course, I looked through the rest of the exams. I didn't find anyone else who took it at the exact same time, so I have no smoking gun for anyone else, but these 2 I did. So that's kind of what I have as far as what I want to do. I'm going to stop sharing this because I want to, again, get more of your thoughts and ideas. I know we only have 10 minutes reserved for this, but we can go over, obviously. I don't mind that. And if anyone you want to stay longer, that's fine. But I want to get those some thoughts about what you've done, what you think works, what you think doesn't work, and we can just have more of a discussion. I don't know how to start this, but does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
So Steve, I kind of tried to anticipate the move to online at the end of the semester. And so I had Kathy Dean reserve one of the big rooms over in Olskamp, and I moved a lot of the weight of my exams to the midterms and just proctored them in person. So it's kind of it's like a resistance to avoid the online altogether. I think I made my midterms 30% each and proctored them in person, and I made the final 5% or something. And I just sort of assume that there's going to be some cheating there. And so that's sort of cheating the issue of cheating, right? I just reject the premise of the online exam. That's probably not going to work in the spring, just because evidently they've decided not to use huge rooms anymore.
Oh, really?
The most people in a room is 56 in the spring at a time. So that kind of puts the kibosh on that.
Well, this specific situation, I mean, obviously, in terms of having just the final being online, should not happen in the spring. I mean, there's no Thanksgiving. So we won't have this exact situation, but I mean, it's either going to be all online or all in person. But basically what you did was you kind of, like I said, that one, de-emphasized the online exam. You tried to de-incentivize the cheating for that exam. And of course, econ. I thought about, as you were saying, you know, it sounded like you were doing some game theory calculations in prepping for this.
Yeah, I'm teaching them game theory right now, so I like to think I practice what I preach.
Okay.
And I was kind of the opposite, Pete. I always assumed that even if I was trying to proctor, I've got 80 students crammed into a room that fits 80. I'm not going to be able to stop all the cheating even by standing there. So I really wasn't getting that much worse of an impact by moving that exam online.
Yeah, that's true too. We don't check, you know, there is cheating that happens in person too, and I've seen that. I guess I'm a little more confident just because if I'm there and I have my suspicions, I hope I'm not biased against any particular, person, but I can monitor them more, I guess. And there's ways to do that online also. But yeah, that's it.
But yeah, so there is a comfort there in person, but there's this realization that that's going to happen no matter what you do, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, the hallway conversations when you had back-to-back classes aren't really any different than the conversations because your final Tuesday and the second one's on Friday. That has always been an issue. So trying to change up those exams just enough. I'll change a couple values in a problem or something. So to your point about making multiple versions of the same question, if it was 12,000 the answer for the first group, it's going to be 10,000 for the second group. So if they just try to enter that value in, they're going to get caught with it. And I've also gotten really good at looking at properties of files that they submit, because there you can often find information about who originated this, who was the last to work on it, and get some of that information that was part of the case that Pete and I had last spring with the student who was purchasing from an outside source, that he wasn't even smart enough to go in and change that he was the last person to modify the files. So.
Yeah, I would appreciate some knowledge about that because I always feel like I can see some things, but there's got to be more. Like I look at an Excel file, you can just see who when was last saved and whose computer it was working on. But if they're working on my exam in the library or something, there's no proof there. I did catch 8 students in my first exam this semester that all turned in perfect score exam. So that was a red flag because like Steve was talking about, let them all cheat. I kind of make exams so hard that even if they collaborate and they, 2 knuckleheads don't know what they're doing, they're all going to basically get 70% even helping each other. But I had 8 people get 100% on my first exam. And it was just and I showed this to my colleague Ebo, and he didn't think there was enough proof. But I saw that they did things exactly the same way correctly. And, exactly the same way, even if it's correct, it was just, just a formula with extra parentheses or something like that, So I called them on it and they immediately just gave it up and said, yeah, we all collaborated. So they all got zeros on that exam. In terms of de-emphasizing the final, well, the university has made the final exam week to be legal in Ohio 150 minutes. So, my exams always use up the whole time. Most students stay for my whole time. So I don't think that happens on the final, but I think that's my plan is I have 35% of my course is the final. It's I have 3 midterms that are a week of testing and a final exam week, which is a week of testing. So I think of the final exam as equivalent to all of the testing you've done earlier in the semester. And so if I have 45% midterms, I make the final not 45%, but almost. And so maybe that's going to be a problem. We'll see with it that emphasized.
I have a question about the final exam. Because they get the 150 minutes, do we have to give the 150 minutes if we've only designed a 50-minute exam?
I believe
doesn't matter.
Well, I think so. I was on faculty senate when they were doing this, and basically what it is they made the final exam period longer specifically because the state of Ohio counts the number of minutes we are in contact with our students.
Right.
And when we switched to 15 weeks, we were short. And so they added time to the final exam to get us to the requirement for the state of Ohio.
And we're still not, by the way, because we started on Wednesday, and I know they're doing Wednesday before Thanksgiving, but we're still 1 lecture short. If you have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class this semester, even with the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, you're still a lecture short. Which is, to me, it's like, how can they break the law and just say, who cares?
Well, there's
by the way, can I get some feedback for one of the Canvas options that Steve mentioned. One question at a time. I also used the not allow the students to go back to their prior question. So they do one by one. Apparently it's kind of to minimize the cheating. But clearly students complain, because for some questions they couldn't solve, so they want to go back and then redo it, but that's not allowed. So I wonder whether this is really effective, and then whether you received any kind of students complaint about that option.
I have had students complain about that.
Yeah.
And they don't like it because if you give them 60 minutes, for example, on an exam, they're worried about having time for the end, and so they rush to the first questions, and they don't want to spend the time because they're worried about, especially if you have like some multiple choice and some short answer, they want to make sure they have enough time for the short answer.
Right.
I
think it is actually effective, right? Effective in minimizing, not completely avoiding, but at least minimizing some cheating.
It reduces,
right? Some collaboration, but I think there's a kind of trade-off, between.
And so if you're gonna, but you combine that, if you combine that with the randomizing the order of questions, and those two combined mean the two people sitting side by side can't, they're not going to get the same questions at the same time. They can't go for, they could in theory, write down answers and share them that way. But
can you randomize questions in the Canvas quiz? I see you can randomize the multiple choice answers, but the questions.
If you put them in a group, you have to put them in a group, and then they're.
Oh yeah. I do groups. I didn't think of putting the whole thing in a. Big,
I see. Okay.
So let me.
But by the way, the one question at a time, it'll do a good job of preventing cheating of two people working together. Doesn't prevent cheating of them looking stuff up online.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but I also give 3 different versions of the exam, and also the name the company the same, or XYZ company, for example, and then I changed the next semester to like ABC company. I used to use the different name, Falcon Tiring, Falcon Construction, but apparently students recognize and use that information, to get the answer. So what I did is I just changed the name to the same one, XYZ, the same company name. And I think that's one of the items that Steve mentioned, that change the question wording. But I don't know how effective, but.
I found changing that company name to a Fortune 100 company really messes up the Google searches, because when you put in, if that's the first thing of your question, it's going to pull up all the data about that company on the first couple pages of the Google search and not even get to the rest of the question itself. So I'll go in and I'll change from Ford to Coca-Cola, like you mentioned, Steve, just to kind of create that additional.
So I wanted to really quickly, I want to share my screen for a second again. I want to show you a couple things. Just someone, Amy Morgan in chat asked to see this, and I'll show you also what I was talking about with the randomizing the questions, just to make sure everyone sees what we're talking about. So let's see. So you should be able to see. Should be able to see my. This is a quiz results of a quiz. You can see that, right? Correct. Okay, good. All right, so. See, I was going to show the name in a second anyway, but so I tried hiding the name. But so we got, this is 5 out of 5. This person got it right. But so you have all this here, and you know the answer to the questions. There is this thing on the top right here called View Log, and I click on the View Log, and now it tells me everything that they did. And so it says they started this at this exact time, and it's down here. It's down to the seconds, and then they started the session 11 seconds in. They answered question 1. They maybe read question 2 and then answer question 2 at 1:31, answer question 3 at 2:12, answer question 4 at 2:32, and question 5 is a short answer. So you see that it keeps on saving as they're reading it, as they're writing it, and so you have an exact log of everything that they've done while in the exam. And you can see this was a small quiz. I didn't, it's untimed. It's designed to make sure that they've read the material. watch the lecture video and things like that. You know, if they go away from the Canvas page, it says that, you know, so they looked away and then they resumed the exam. It's not perfect, you know, I mean, there's, you know, this person stopped viewing at 32 seconds, then somehow answered question 2 and then resumed after that. So something's missing there, but in terms of answering the questions, I think that part at least is accurate for the you know, in terms of timing when they clicked A, B, C, or D. So that's this, and it was, you know, in the SpeedGrader view log. I believe you can. I think there's other ways of getting it too. I think you can get it a different way, but this is the way I usually use. I think I can go somewhere through moderate this quiz, or no, maybe quiz statistics. I shouldn't have shown you guys all the students there, but anyway, but that's one. And then in terms of randomizing, if you're not familiar with this, I just want to again show this too. So you go into edit the quiz, and when you're looking at your questions, you know, you have all the questions listed. Here they're just going in order. I can do a question group, and then as Jeff was saying, I can put every single question on the exam in this question group. So I create this group, and then I can move every single question into the group, and then there we go.
Can you have groups? Can you have groups within
tell
groups?
it, of course, that I want to edit this now. I want to pick every question. So
yeah, I have
Chris,
groups to have like slightly different versions of questions or questions that are similar, and so I'll put them into groups. You know, maybe 3 different calculations. I'll randomly pick one that they have to do. But then if I want to randomize, can I randomize groups? So can I have a group of questions within inside a larger group of questions?
No, I don't think you can. But what I've done in the past for that, like what I've done in the past is I've done a group of, let's say I have, you know, 30 questions on the exam. There might be a group of 10 questions or 5 questions that those are randomized.
Right.
And then I have one where I've got the 3 versions of the same question.
Right.
And then
so you're not randomizing the whole exam, but you randomize chunks of it. Yeah, that could work. Yeah.
I mean, it depends on what you're doing. So yeah. So I mean, if you want to do different versions of the question, you can either put some of them, you can put them at the beginning and try and catch them that way or off the bat, and then have a giant chunk of it be completely randomized, or you can put them in the middle. You know, there's different strategies for, you know, how you might want to do that.
May I ask a follow-up question on that log?
Sure.
So you, in order to determine that you had 2 students that were doing something side by side, you downloaded every log and looked at them. There's not a spreadsheet that prints them all out.
No, but I only, I mean, the way I was grading the exam, I don't know if you know this, there's when you're in SpeedGrader, there's a little gear icon at the top, and one of the options you can do is to sort the exams by the time they were turned in, and that's how I had it sorted. And so as I was reading the exams, and I was grading, so I'm grading question 10, and I'm going through each, you know, through all the questions. I got to 2 that had, I can't remember who was saying it before, who had the same correct word, like it was a proper word, but they were the first 2 students that used it. And then the way I did the exam is the exam was available for 4 days or something like that. And so 2 consecutively had the exact same weird wording. No, it wasn't weird, it was correct. And it was, and in talking to them, it was actually a word that I had used in class, but no one else had caught on, but they both use it. So I saw that, it caught my attention. And then I looked at when they submitted it, and I saw they submitted their exam within a minute of each other. And so then I just looked at those 2 logs. But then after that, again, it was available for, you know, for 4 days. So I went through each exam just to see when they were all turned in. And that's, you can see just scrolling through SpeedGrader. And none of them were turned in, other than the people that helped with those anyway. But the 2 that submitted their exams at the same time, those are the only 2 that I looked at the log.
That's really helpful. That key point of when they turned them in, because I saw you had 60 students. You certainly don't want to go through and do that 60 times and try to line them up. Yeah,
no.
Thank you. Thank you.
So but again, so that, and And yeah, so having it available for multiple days is what allowed me to say, okay, these people, if you happen to randomly take it, your two teammates that randomly take it at 10:30, 2 days before it's due, and start within 2 seconds of each other, it raised a flag. And then that's why I looked, had that one similar answer, the timing, and then that's when I looked at the log. But yeah, there is no way to get a download of that log for everybody. At least not that I'm aware of.
I just searched Canvas's LMS community site and I don't see anything like that. So okay. There's some people that are requesting it, but it hasn't, I don't think it's been added.
Okay.
Yeah, my students, since it's a remote class, it's timed same, everyone's taking it at the same time, so that doesn't necessarily help. But of those 8 people, the other proof I had was that one person started and finished the exam like 8 minutes later, and it's a 50-minute exam, and that person is actually given 50% more time, so they finished the exam in 8 minutes even though they were given 75. That was a red flag.
So yeah, so having everyone overlapping at the same time and taking it at the same time, I don't do that even. So I'm remote as well. I still choose to have it available over multiple days. That's just my preference. And because the cheating that I had a few years ago, that was an in-person class, the one where I had that extra credit question I mentioned at the beginning with my kids in their Halloween costumes. I told them, I thought it would minimize cheating, and I had them all take the exam. I did it online. I remember why I did it online but I just said online during our class period. Oh, it's because it was an essay question. They wanted to be able to type faster and didn't want to have to write. So I said, we'll do it online, but I want you to take it during the exam time. And I thought that would minimize cheating, but they told me afterwards that some of the cheaters said that actually made it easier for them to coordinate when to take the exam. So I said, hey, so they all went to the library, which was open at the time. It was years ago. And they worked in groups and had no problem with it.
So can we have somebody who handles our Canvas account send a request up to the powers that be at Canvas? It would be really nice and helpful to have Turnitin or some other plagiarism check on quizzes like we do on assignments, especially if it can check other students' answers, which Turnitin does for assignments, or it could check on the web, especially if it's Chegg, that'd be great, to see if those answers are matching and give you a score. That would be a nice feature. They can do it for assignments. I don't know why they can't do it for essay questions on quizzes.
Yeah, that's always been something that bothered, we've talked about this. That's bothered me for years as well. And that would help, I think, but for some reason I don't have that. I don't know if having IT contacted would help any or not. Maybe our CATL can try and reach out.
I'll
volunteering you to do it.
Thanks. Jeff, I'll get with you to flesh that out because I'm not entirely understanding, but I'll raise it with CATL and see if we can put something forward.
Mm-hmm. All right, so, I know this was supposed to go to 11:30. Obviously, we've gone over, and it's fine. But does anyone have? Any other thoughts that people have?
I just want to say thank you because I'm coming away with a lot of good ideas and things I'm going to change right away for spring that I just hadn't thought about or didn't know about. And so thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone joining us today. Just a heads up, we're not having a spotlight in December, but our next one is going to be January, let me make sure I get it right, 7th. And it's actually going to be a panel from CATL and our high impact teachers for tips and tricks going into the spring semester, particularly around some of the topics you said were important, and that was ideas for hybrid learning, how to encourage attendance and participation, either in person if you're hybrid and or remote, and some technology ideas around breakout rooms and whiteboards. So watch your email for an upcoming spotlight, and that'll be right before classes start in January. So thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Steve.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
Good luck on finals, everybody.
Yeah, good luck, everyone.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Thank you.